In this video, we will show you how to replace your fuel pressure regulator on this Dodge Ram. This will be mounted directly to the top of your fuel sending unit along the top of your fuel tank. Let's get into it. Okay friends, let's get started on our job. The first thing we'll do is make our way under the hood. We're looking for the fuse box. We'll lift this up by grabbing onto these two tabs and quickly have a look at the legend along the inside. What we're looking for is the fuel system relay, number 51 right there. Now if we were to hold this right next to where the fuse box is, we're going to find that same relay. Go ahead and take hold of that, give it a little wiggle and lift it up and out of there. A quick look for corrosion. We'll set this aside temporarily. Now we can hop inside the vehicle and attempt to start it. Now once you attempted to start the vehicle and you found that it did not start and run, continue on by reinstalling that relay. You want to make sure you press it in there as far as possible so you're sure it's making complete contact. We'll put on the protective cover after that and move along to the negative battery terminal. To disconnect the negative battery terminal, I'll be using an 11mm wrench. I just want to loosen up this nut just enough that I can remove the terminal end from the battery. We'll set that aside so it's making no contact. Let's make our way over to the fuel door. Remove the fuel cap, give it a quick inspection, and set it aside. Now let's make our way underneath the driver's side rear of the vehicle. We're looking for the fuel filler neck and the return line. To remove these, we'll be using an 8mm or flathead screwdriver. We'll just loosen up the clamp a little bit, and we should be able to slide that down and out of the way. Once you have that loose, go ahead and remove the hose from the tube itself, being extremely careful not to damage the hose. Give each hose a quick inspection, make sure it is still soft and pliable and it's not torn, worn, or damaged in any way. Now that I have that one off, I'll do the exact same thing for the filler hose. A quick check, this feels good as well. Now the next thing you're going to want to do is apply support underneath your fuel tank because we're going to be removing each of our fuel straps. To remove the fuel straps, you'll find that you have a stud that comes down from the frame and it has a 15mm nut holding it in place. Remove that nut. There's that mounting nut. We'll clean and inspect our mounting hardware, replace it as necessary. Let's do the same to the front strap. Once you have the nut off of there, we'll continue on by taking hold of the strap. We're going to pull it down. Now we can flex that strap out of our way. And now we'll do the same to the rear strap. Let's take this strap. We're going to bring it around to the slot. And you should be able to pull it right out. Now we can start lowering the fuel tank down. While doing so, we want to be paying attention to our fuel hoses along the driver's side frame. We'll be bringing this down and carefully put each of those hoses on the inside of the frame rail. Once you have the fuel tank lowered enough that you can reach up along the top, we'll start by disconnecting the electrical connector. For this electrical connector, you'll find that you have a red locking tab. I'll use a small pocket screwdriver to slide this towards the rear of the vehicle to unlock this. Now once that's unlocked, you don't necessarily have to fully remove the red locking tab. The next thing we'll do is squeeze right where my index finger is, and we should be able to draw this off of the fuel pump assembly. A quick check for corrosion. Assuming that looks good, we can set that aside. Now just to the rear of that, you'll find that you have your fuel line. For this, it has two locking tabs, one on either side of it. You want to squeeze those in, and then you should be able to draw the line off. Sometimes you have to use pliers for this, or you could just use your fingers. It really depends on what works best for you. There's that. Now we'll pay attention to this return line. For this, once again, it has two locking ears. We'll squeeze those in and we should be able to slide this up and off of here. Now we can start bringing down the fuel tank the rest of the way so we can gain access to that fuel pump assembly. While doing so, we want to pay attention to our two hoses. We don't want to crimp those or damage them in any way. Once you have your fuel tank down to a workable position, We'll continue on to removing this line across the top of it. Now for this, there's an area that you want to try to squeeze together, and once you have those two ears squeezed, we can pull this right off. We'll just give that a quick inspection. At this point, we can continue on to removing the locking ring that's holding the fuel pump assembly down to the fuel tank. To remove this, you want to make sure that you remove any debris from around this area so nothing falls down inside of the fuel tank. There is a fuel tank ring removal tool that you could slide right on top of this and spin it. Not everybody has one of those. What you could do is continue on with a small pry bar and a hammer and just give it a couple loving bonks counterclockwise to remove it. Before I go too much further, I'll just give it a quick blast with compressed air. Now, once you have that locking ring off of there, the next thing you want to do is just pay quick attention to it, make sure it is still reusable. If it looks like it's dry rotted or cracked in any way, you want to make sure you replace it. Let's take hold of this. We'll give it a little wiggle to break it free. You might have to pry it up and out of there. Just be careful not to damage the fuel tank in any way. It is probable that there'll be a whole bunch of fuel still inside of this sending unit, so you want to be extremely careful. We'll make sure that we recycle it properly. Now with this on the bench, we can continue on to installing our brand new fuel pressure regulator with the gasket. Before we can install it, obviously we have to remove the original. You can see that located up along here. Let's just have a quick look at the orientation. You can tell that this comes through right along where this electrical connector would be. Now that we've shown that, let's have a look inside of this area. You can see the bottom of that regulator. It has a hose that leads all the way down. We need to remove the hose from the bottom of the regulator. It has a small clamp holding it in place. Go ahead and remove that clamp. To remove this clip, we'll be using a pick. You can also use a small screwdriver, whatever works best for you. Essentially, we're just going to get in here and try to pry this apart without damaging the line. If you have a hard time with a small pick, you can also use a larger pick, whatever works best for you. Slide this clamp out of here. These clamps are typically a single-time use. Now we can start removing the hose from the bottom of the fuel pressure regulator. We'll use a flat blade screwdriver for this. Make your way in between here and gently start prying this apart. You want to be extremely careful not to damage the hose because we are reusing that. Once you have it off, just go ahead and give it a quick inspection. Make sure it's not torn, worn, or damaged in any way. This one looks fine. Now we can start removing the fuel pressure regulator from the fuel pump assembly. To do that, we can use a long screwdriver or pry bar and just gently pry this out of place, being extremely careful not to damage the assembly. On the bottom of this regulator, the gasket came out with it. If yours did not, you would want to have a quick look up along the top of the assembly here and pop it right out of there using a pick or a screwdriver. Now we can install the brand new regulator and gasket. Looking at the gasket itself, you can tell you have a flat top area and then you have a beveled lower area. The beveled spot will go down inside of this. We'll align the small groove here and just gently work it around. Double check to make sure it's completely seated. Let's apply a little lubricant here. Time for the regulator. We're going to slide it in. You'll find that you have some pressure as it makes its way to the locking point. Once it makes its way past that, it'll snap right in. We'll get this aligned properly. And now we can install our hose. Before installing the hose on there, you want to make sure that you have your clamp on the hose and ready for installation as well. We'll just take this and slide it right on over there. Now we'll slide the hose up onto the fuel pressure regulator. This part can be a little bit difficult. If you needed to, you could carefully grab onto the hose with some pliers. Just be extremely careful not to tear it in any way. Confirm that it's all the way against the pressure regulator. I'll give it a tug, and now we can slide the clamp into the proper position. Now once you have the clamp up here, the next thing that you'll want to do is pay attention to the small slot on this ear and then the locking tabs down along the rest of the clamp. We need to make it so that that slot is aligned with the locking tab. We'll press it in and then we'll make our way around and squeeze this area in to lock it in the proper position. Now that I have those lined up, we'll continue on with our special pliers here. You want to put it right over that top squared out area, and we should be able to squish this down. Give it a nice squeeze. Double check that hose to make sure it's completely secure. Let's get this back over to the vehicle. The next thing we'll do is clean up the top of the fuel tank where that fuel pump will sit. We'll take this and put it in the proper positioning. Just slide it right down in. Now before we slide it down too far, we want to put the gasket into the fuel tank here. Slide this down in. Let's just make sure that the gasket's seated properly. You don't want it falling in anywhere. Now before we bring it all the way down till it's completely bottomed out, it's important to make sure you put on the ring. Now we can install that locking ring. We'll just carefully put this over here. We're going to have to bring it around. Here we are. Once you feel as though you have it flat and level, we can continue on by pressing this down. And we'll continue bringing it down as far as we can with the locking ring. Now that I have this started on, I'm going to double check all the way around to make sure that it's seated properly. We'll just continue on by tightening it until it's good and tight. You want to make sure there's a good seal. Double check that fuel pump, make sure it's in there nice and tight. Now at this point, we can start raising up the fuel tank until we can gain access to reconnecting our fuel lines and our electrical connector. Connecting our electrical connector, we'll press this in, listen for a click. There's our click. Give it a tug to make sure it is secured, and then make sure you lock it in with the red locking tab. Now we can attach this, bring the line right over, slide it into position. Listen for a click from that, double check to make sure it is properly secured. Now we'll continue bringing the fuel tank up so we can connect in our last fuel line. Let's get that fuel line in place. You might have to shift the fuel tank around a little bit. Press it in, listen for a click, give it a nice tug, make sure it's secured. You do not want a fuel leak up along the top of your fuel tank. Once you have the fuel tank all the way up against the body of the vehicle, we'll be continuing on with our straps. We'll take the forward one and carefully start bringing it around between the drive shaft and the fuel tank. Carefully press it all the way up onto that stud. If you have a hard time, you could put a jack underneath this area to continue pressing it up while you press this into position. Start on that mounting nut. Now we will not tighten this yet. We're going to move along to putting on the rear one as well. Let's get the rearward strap on here. It just slides right into the groove on the frame there. Now we can swing this around, put it on the stud, and start on that mounting nut. Now we can snug these up. You want to start with the rearward strap first, and then we'll tighten the forward one. Let's remove the support. Let's reattach our fuel fill hose. Slide that right onto the filler neck. We'll take hold of the clamp, slide it into its original position, and tighten it up. Double check to make sure that's nice and tight. Now we can reconnect our negative battery terminal. These are 11 millimeter. Make sure this is nice and tight. At this point, we can make our way to the gas cap. We'll put that in the proper position and close the hatch. Okay friends, we showed you how to install your fuel pressure regulator. At this point, start up the vehicle, let it run, and check for fuel leaks. Aside from that, take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.